Hello, race fans. Welcome again to another edition of the Industry Insider here on the EKN Radio Network, episode number 10 of our industry-focused podcast series. Hello, my name is Rob Howden here in the Cooper Tire Broadcast Center. Great to have you with us. Thanks for tuning in, whether you're on your laptop, listening right through ekartingnews.com/radio, or whether you've downloaded our app through Google Play or iTunes. Either or, great to have you with us. And a guest that I'm proud to say I've known for probably over 20 years now, one of the all-out veterans in the sport of karting, Alan Rudolph from the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy, joining us today on the EKN Radio Network. Alan, thanks for taking some time out of your busy day. I know things are crazy down there in Texas, but thank you for joining us here on the EKN Radio Network.
You're welcome, Rob. As always, thanks for having me, and thanks for the support. And man, when you say 20 plus years we've been friends, that just makes us that much older, I guess, right?
Yeah, but dude, let's just say straight up, we're still good looking.
Heck yeah.
You have hair. I'm losing mine, so that's a bonus for you at least. Right?
My goal is to me and AJ Allmendinger have to fight for who's got the coolest hair, but
it's close, but that's neck and neck.
I know, right? No, my goal is to make 50 look good.
I'm already there, and I've succeeded. So you know what? You're next. So, okay, let's set this up for people that maybe don't know your whole story. We're going to get into that in a second. I'll kind of play it quickly. Obviously, Alan, a guy that came up through the sport, many years of racing, factory Margay at one point. He was with the factory driver for Burrell through Enzo Chiaviti in the 3S program for a while, driving for so many different teams. Buller, I think you were a factory driver at one point. Yeah. But multi-time King of the Streets winner, multi-time WKA champion, road race, sprint, street circuit, you name it. Alan, of course, then worked his way to the very top level. SCUSA Pro Moto Tour, SCUSA Pro Tour. Was one of those guys that never wanted to give up and go to Masters, kept running in the S1 category. Just a level of racing that was amazing. Then, of course, transitioned then into education. Well, we'll get him to talk more about that, but became obviously the lead instructor and a big part of the Bondurant Superkart School and the Bob Bondurant School for High Performance Driving. Then was able to transition into the kind of his dream, which was to have that named program, the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy, his own school. Had a fantastic co-owner, someone that wanted to fund it. They built a new racetrack in Houston, Texas, Speed Sports Racing Park. So that's where he is plying his craft now. But Alan, bringing everybody up to speed, here's what I want to start with, because I think this is cool. I want to hear your origin stories. I want to hear, let's say you are the karting superhero, and it's a comic book, and this is the first issue. So what is your origin story? Talk about how you got into the sport of karting and how you kind of got to where you are from your own words.
Well, it goes a really long ways back, obviously. And, I kind of grew up in an automotive shop. Maybe most people don't know about that, but my dad owned an automotive shop. So from probably the time I was 6-7 years old, I was in the auto shop, sweeping the floors and learning how to work on cars and whatever. And then, we had a customer that needed an engine put in their car and didn't have money to pay for it. But he said, "Hey, I got this go-kart. It's a racing kind of go-kart." And we didn't even know what that meant. Would you be willing to trade? So my dad traded this engine swap for this first go-kart. It had a 100cc Yamaha on it. And we rebuilt this thing, and away we went to our first race back in, oh Lord, 1979, if you could believe that.
Wow.
And
talk about that flipping of the switch that would change your life. Right
yeah,
there.
No, that was it. I mean, and the funny part is the track was this little tiny pavement oval, and it had on the back straight had a kink in it. So it was like an oval that kind of a kidney bean, like it kind of came into itself. And it was the most lame thing ever, but it was obviously, life changing, and I was addicted pretty much ever since then. So, and then after that, it was just kind of game on. We, as a family, we just all did it. My brother raced, my sister dabbled in it, and so as a family, we just kept going from there.
Let's talk a bit about at one point in your career, like so many young drivers, you think, hey, I want to do this for a living. I'm good at it. I've won a ton of championships. I'm one of the best in the country. You take your shot. Talk about you maybe transitioning for a period of time into trying to race cars?
Yeah, you're right. Everybody that's racing karts, at some point as a kid, they're like, "Oh, I want to do this for a living," and you hear young kids say, "I'm going to be the next Formula One racer." Well, settle down a little bit, be
Right.
realistic about your goals. But things are a little bit different now than when I was a young teenager. There's programs like what was the Mazda Road to Indy, and there's Team USA, and there's different platforms that didn't really exist when I was a teenager. And
Agreed.
so, you know what it was? It was either, you got to, and still today, you've got to have the money, you got to have the support to move on and do other things. That part of it hasn't changed whatsoever. At the end of the day, you still have to have the money and the support to move forward. And things all have to align properly. But the one thing that I was never good at, which was, and my wife loves this about me, but talking about myself, like I could never really brag about myself. To this day, I don't, and to be honest, that's one of the downfalls is I could never go out and look for sponsorship and ask for people for money. And, I always tell the story about Michael McDowell when he was working for me at Bondurant and a teenager looking to try to make the next move. He didn't introduce himself to anybody without shaking his hand, say, "Hey, I'm Michael McDowell, race car driver," and then boom, right into, "You want to sponsor me?" I mean,
Yep.
literally
Yeah.
everybody he talked to for money. I could never do that. That just wasn't in my DNA. And but look, it's led me down the road I'm at now, and so I've had some. I was able to go do some car stuff. Formula Mazda's there for a couple of years, and I guess my biggest race then would have been Petit Le Mans back in '03 with Chris McMurray in the LMP2 car.
Yep.
And so I've got to do some stuff, and that led me to hanging out with Bill and Chase Elliott, and Bill was trying to get me in some stock car stuff, and that was really cool. It was a quick couple of years thinking I was going to try to make a transition into roundy round racing, and that didn't happen. And you know what? That's fine. It's just it's the path that I'm going down, and now I have my own track and school and all that kind of stuff. So it was meant to be.
Yeah, if you think about it, Alan, it as well gave you a really rounded, circle of experience because you've driven so much stuff, not just karting. You did the Formula car, you did LMP, you did some sports racer competition back in the day, and I remember talking about the Shrike that you drove in Sports 2000. I think when we go far back is when I was working for National Kart News in '97 and '98. I did an article on you. That's, I think, kind of the first time I met you through Margay, but that was the first article I did. And back then, Kurt Paluzzi from National Kart News, every article had to be like 4,000 words. It was so hard to write that many words on somebody. So we went deep into everything you were doing at that point. But so you have a very rounded experience, a career, so that you're able to bring so much, I think, to your students when they do come to the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy. Now, that's the next question. So where does the switch go off? Was it just an opportunity to go to work at Bondurant? You're like, I want to stay in racing. Hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to pick up my job at Bondurant. Was that the first school opportunity that, to become a coach or a driving instructor?
Yeah, but to be honest, that was that really goes hand in hand with the question you asked earlier. Like, you're trying to become a race car driver, and when you don't have financial backing to do it, one of the ways to do many, I could list a handful, many guys that came through either Skip Barber or even Bondurant. At Bondurant alone, we've had Buddy Rice and Darren Law and Johnny O'Connell. All these guys had come through Bondurant as an instructor, and ended up finding their sponsor, or the guy that wanted to go racing. And so, to be honest, when I met Bob, and I met Bob at the World Championships in Charlotte in '98, and he had just started the karting school. And when the opportunity arose to go to Bondurant, my goal was to go there and learn as much as I could for a year and try to find a sponsor and be out.
Find the gentleman driver, right? Find
that guy who wants to go racing, and just like Michael McDowell did. I mean, the list goes on and on. All the guys that either through the Bondurant platform or Skip Barber or whatever. I mean, that's just an avenue or a way to continue continue in motorsports driving. And that's what really was the reason I went to Bondurant to start with. And then that 1 year turned into 16.
Turned into 16. Now, how long was it in that middle of time? You said, you go from, I'm trying to potentially, connect with one of the guys I'm coaching to, I really dig this. This is my program. You and the family were living in Arizona. Let's put it this way. First, you met your wife at the Bondurant school as well. So that's a big bonus. Probably the biggest bonus you got.
Exactly right. Yeah, my wife was already there working at the school, and so we met, and man, it's now 18 years later, happily married, and that's good because she loves the sport and loves what we do, and so with Aiden racing now and everything. But no, I would say that there was no time when it switched and was like, okay, I'm good. I like doing this. I always liked doing it from day one, and knew that it was a place that I could call home and be there for a while. But at no point did I ever stop trying to race. I mean, any opportunity that came in front of me, I tried to take advantage of and utilize the opportunity and go racing. So, I remember when I don't know, at one point I talked to Bob about not racing much anymore, and he goes, never use the word retire. You just don't retire because you never know when the opportunity is going to come. So I never would have ever said that. I never would have used that word retire. So I've never retired. So if an opportunity comes up, I'm going to drive, right?
Let me in. I'm ready to go. Put me in, coach. That's good. Folks, stick with us. More to come here as we're just getting things going with this edition of the Industry Insider, episode number 10 here on the EKN Radio Network. A special opportunity to talk with one of the true ambassadors of our sport, Alan Rudolph, from the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy at Speed Sports Racing Park in Houston, Texas, up in New Caney. Stay with us. Lots more to come.
Hey everybody, this is Chris Wheeler, Director of Motorsports for Bell Racing USA. For the 2018 SCUSA Pro Tour, be sure to check out our partners PSL Karting for all of your on-site needs, from helmets, visors, accessories, and all hardware, so you can stay safe on the racetrack. New for 2018, the CMR KC7 Carbon, the first of its kind, the only carbon helmet in the world approved by the CIK for youth use. Check it out at PSL Karting, and thanks for tuning in to EKN Live.
In a sport where the difference between winning and losing is measured in hundredths of a second, you can't afford to leave anything on the table. You invest in the best equipment, the latest components, and top-of-the-line data acquisition systems. Anything to find one more tenth, right? I'll tell you right now, the best investment you could ever make is in yourself. If you want to improve your results, it's time for professional instruction and coaching at the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy. Located at the new state-of-the-art Speed Sports Racing Park just north of Houston, the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy uses the very best equipment, Burrell Art Carts. They offer half-day, one-day, two-day, and three-day clinics. They have a one-on-one student-to-instructor ratio, and they will design a customized curriculum for each student. Alan Rudolph is one of the most respected people in the sport, and he has nearly 20 years' experience training drivers, including Chase Elliott, Neil Alberico, Austin Versteeg, and Sabre Cook, and rising stars like Pietro Fittipaldi. Train with a champion with over 30 years of racing experience to get proven results. Start off your season with a driver tune-up. Tune up your season with some driver coaching. Or get ready for the big races by training with the best. Reserve your dates now by calling 866-607-RACE. That's 866-607-7223. For more information, visit speedsportsracingpark.com/racing-academy. Welcome back to episode number 10 of the Industry Insider. My name is Rob Howden, joined today by Alan Rudolph from the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy at Speed Sports Racing Park up in New Caney, Texas, in Houston, essentially one of the biggest metropolitan areas of the United States. We're going to talk more about that racetrack in a little while. Alan, we went through kind of your origin story, how you got into the sport, how you found yourself at Bondurant Superkart School. Let's segue now into the new opportunity, which was just obviously massive. You go from being such a core part of the Bondurant Superkart School and the whole Bondurant School of High Performance Driving. Where was it? Or let's start with this. You and I talked in your last 2, 3, 4, 5 years there about the potential of having your school, having your name on a school. Was that something that came early? Was that a dream that potentially, got some momentum early on?
I think, to be honest, there just became a point at Bondurant where, I don't know, for lack of better words, the writing was on the wall. There was a time where I felt like, what's next? What can I do next? And so, I'd say probably 3 years or so before my departure of Bondurant, I started kind of looking around and talking to people and even looking at like the track in Phoenix, PKRA, looking at it,
yep.
kind of privately, quietly looking at it as a way to build what I would, what I think a proper racing track and facility should be. And so, there's other people out there that are trying to do stuff, and I had talked to several people, and there's a lot of guys who have the idea and just never come to fruition. Over the years, if I had a dollar for everybody that told me they were going to build a racetrack, I could probably build my own, right? They're
Right.
just now after actually doing it, I see why. I mean, it is a beast to build, especially a complex like I built. It takes a lot of work and a lot of people behind you, a lot of money. And, so anyway, I just basically boiled down to having a dream and putting it out there. And, and then Tim Crawford came along. Tim had the same sort of idea, and I had heard about his project, but he and I had never met. And once he got, control of the property, and it became real, then he started asking around the industry, and my name popped up a few times. And man, we connected. It was December of 14, I guess. And by February of 15, I was out of Bondurant, and man, away we went. And so full steam ahead.
Yeah, talk about that project, because I know that when you and I first discussed it, I was obviously first and foremost thrilled for you. But man, you and I had a lot of conversations where you kind of intimated to me, like you're doing right now, that man, this is a beast, Rob. This is planning and just to get everything where it needed to be. Then once you put things in play, it's dealing with the rain and all the dampness in the facility, and just the amount of work that you put in to get this thing off the ground first and foremost, but then designed and then moving forward from there. Man, it had to have aged you a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely has. I think I aged 10 years in the last 3 of this thing. The design and stuff was actually kind of the fun part. Tim had some initial plans. He had contracted this gentleman to kind of give him some preliminary layouts. And when I saw it, and when I came on board, Tim's like, "Look, I'm not married to any of this. If you want to change some stuff up, have at it, clean slate." And so I did. I totally scrapped everything they had. And so I basically got to lay it out how I felt like it would flow the best for general public and the racers and all that. And so completely designed the performance track from scratch, thinking about all the different elements I'd want to add to it. Everyone asks, did you pick a favorite turn from this track and that track? And
yep.
I would like to say I did, but I didn't. There was no way to really do that. I can go around the different tracks in my head and think about some cool corners, but at the end of the day, I'm not dealing with a blank. I was dealing with a blank sheet of paper, but the property is shaped a certain way, and I had to get 2 tracks in there and a parking lot and all the stuff, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't fit. And so the bottom line is, all I wanted was to make sure that it raced well, and that it had good passing, and that every type of corner. Basically, you've got a constant radius, increasing, decreasing, some S's, and 90-degree corners, and that's it. So if I've got all the elements there, then the rest should just all work. But then I'm stressing out about, well, it looks great on paper, but how's it going to race, and everyone's going to drive in it, and it's one thing on paper, but so far the response has been overwhelming. Everyone loves driving on it, and it races really well, and so I'm happy about all that. So that's the fun part,
Let's set the stage first, Alan, for those who may not know about Speed Sports Racing Park. The track located essentially northeast of Houston, not far outside the city limits.
Yep.
20 minutes, I think, from the airport, something like that.
Yep.
The cool thing is that I think I'm correct on this, but I think you were the first track in America to have both the full competition track and a smaller rental facility as well on the same property. Am I correct in that? Is there any other track that does that? I think it is.
As far as I know, it's the only one like that in the country. And, NOLA has the ability to divide their track up, and they can run, rentals on part of it. But dividing it up, the track isn't really conducive it's just not really a good layout. And so it's difficult for the members, that want to come and practice on the whole track they're going to race on. Well, you can't do that. And so, it's the first of its kind that I'm aware of. And we did that intentionally.
Well, the beauty of that, how many conversations do all of us in the industry have about trying to bring new people into the sport, and how do we get them from indoor karting to come out and become part of the actual competition side of karting? Well, you have a place, folks. If you go on Google Earth, check out the Speed Sports Racing Park website. You'll see that it's amazing. There's the tracks on one half. There's essentially a line right down through the middle where you have the building that supports the rental facility. You walk straight across. There's grandstands between the two tracks side by side. You can walk over to the paddock area, walk over to the pro shop at the competition side. We'll talk about this in a bit too, because we've discussed the fact that the low-cost Burrell 206 packages that you guys are selling at the pro shop are so attractive to some of the guys that are running regularly and in leagues over at the rental car track. They're looking across the board to try to get into a 206.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I don't know. I should probably have kept track how many we've converted this year from rental cart customers into, racing the regular carts, or if nothing else, at least taking my school. They can come do a little class kart racing experience, I call it. They get behind the wheel of our tag cart real quick, and so they're standing there waiting for their rental cart race, and we've got real carts going by at 60, 70 miles an hour, and they get all excited about it. So it's pretty cool.
Let's move to that then, because I think that's probably a good segue. Let's talk about the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy. The track is one thing. You guys are bringing this high level track to North Houston, another great facility in Texas as well. Then you lay out your school, your opportunity from the 16 years you had at the Bob Bondurant, Supercard school. You were able, again, not only did you have a clean sheet of paper for the racetrack, you had a clean sheet of paper for the curriculum for the school. And in your mind, is there anything that sets apart your school, or were you just able to put exactly what you wanted at every level?
Yeah, I would say it's exactly what I want at every level. I mean, the core for me, like the passion is teaching. This past week I had Jace Park there. He's moving from Mini to X30 Junior, and being in a full size kart for the first time and wanted to start off on the right foot, did a really great job. And so that's that. I mean, I would love to, do that a couple times a week and not have to worry about, running the day-to-day business. Let's just teach kids how to race, that'd be great. Yeah. And so that's what I really love to do. But when we're talking about, the masses of people, trying to introduce them to our sport, then, I simply have a course called the Kart Racing Experience. You don't have to have any experience whatsoever. Anyone can do it. We get you right behind the wheel of one of our tag carts, and in a couple hours they're up to speed and away they go. And every one of them was hooked after that, right? And what's the next step? Yeah. We got to go buy one. We got to get into it, I definitely took the 16 years at Bondurant and brought it with me, no doubt about it. But the platform is I always say it's catered to the individual. Somebody that comes to me with a lot of years of experience, I deal with them in a different way than I would obviously a newcomer to the sport, or a kid, kid versus adult, So those classes that are 1, 2, 3 days in length, it's one-on-one, unless they come with a friend or, dad, and, like Jace's dad, Jason, came with him this weekend, and I tell them straight up, I tell the parents, like, this class is as much for you as it is for them right now, because when you leave here, you're their coach. You've got to help guide them along. And so, it's a good learning experience for the parents too.
I find it interesting because one of the things about karting is anytime someone is off the pace, it's immediately what axle do I need to buy? What high performance part do I need? We've all heard kart shops will tell you, okay, this is worth 2/10. This axle's 2/10. You need, you got the wrong hubs on. You got the wrong, whatever it is, right? The bottom line is a vast majority of the drivers from the club level to national level racing, first and foremost, it's the driver. It's the person between the steering wheel and the seat that can make the most difference. Now, in my past life, I was a ski instructor. And I don't care how much money you spend on skis and on poles and on boots. If you're not getting proper instruction, you're not going to get any better. And even at the very top level, there's like Olympic coaches, national coaches taking the absolute best skiers in the country and making them better. Exactly right. It's an issue where I think I want to get it across to more people. Don't bother spending another $1,000 on your engine or buying new hubs or whatever it may be. If you want to go faster, and the fastest way you can go quicker is to go to a school, is to have a coach, is to have someone like you, Alan, sit down and take someone to the next level. And I'm sure that you get to see it all the time, the massive gains that people have when they come to you, but it's really not something that it's understood in cars, because in car racing, there's coaches all the way up. IndyCar drivers still have coaches.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And there's still coaches in IndyCar. There's still coaches in sports car racing. We just, for some reason, people don't understand that or embrace that concept in karting. And that's something that you really have the ability to take someone from the middle of the pack or the back of the pack and move them, grid spots forward in a 1 or a 2 day private coaching session.
You're exactly right, Rob. I mean, look, at the end of the day, axles and hubs, so funny you said that about 2/10. Yeah, that's worth 2/10. That's worth 2/10. You know what? Everything is breaking 2/10. If I had 2/10 for everything that said was going to be 2/10, we'd be 10 seconds ahead of the field. So it's always been 2/10. That's always worth 2/10. And look, there are some time, look, at the very, very top level, if you're one of those guys that's fighting for the top 5 position all the time and on pole, you're going to make an axle change that might give you 1/10 of a second. But ask any one of the top guys. I don't care if you ask Gary Carlton, from a kart that's just really not set up and not working well to one that's really good. How much difference in time is that for me, for a good driver? It's 3/10, right? I mean, I'm going to make, I just need more grip on the rear. I feel like I need to change the axle. Okay, I changed the axle. Holy cow, that made all the difference in the world. But you know what? It was like 2/10 maybe, right? 3/10. And so anything beyond that, and then you really do need to, invest in yourself, I always say. A good example, I have a student a couple of weeks ago, young kid, about 10, 11 years old in Mini Swift. And he was just, his dad says he was struggling with braking, right? He just didn't get the braking figured out. So we were working on it. And look, that's one of the keys to going fast is learning how to use your brakes properly, right? Well, those kids don't do that. And so we were working. And he went 4 sessions in a row and basically couldn't break past this barrier of time, the time that he was at. And then all of a sudden, it finally clicked and literally went 6/10 faster the next session, doing nothing. So then the conversation, because he finally got the braking figured out. He goes 6/10 faster. And so the conversation in front of his dad was, so do you see that we didn't do anything to your kart, right? We didn't touch your kart, didn't change the axle, didn't change the tire pressure. I changed nothing on your go-kart. We just fixed the driver. And he was like, whoa. And all of a sudden it was this big aha moment, because typically this is one of the guys that is constantly changing axles and wheels and hubs and doing all this stuff. But it as much of an aha moment for the kid, it was the same for the dad. The dad's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all this stuff, chasing all this stuff all the time, when all we needed to do was work on the braking. And so,
and that's it, isn't it? Because I use the example when I drive something somewhere, and I'll whether it's Rock Island, I don't get a lot of chance to race, but I'll always come in and they'll say, "What do you want to change?" And I'll say, the first thing I always say is nothing, because I'm not even taking this thing to 90% yet. I'm not at 95% yet. Until I get to the point where I'm 95%, don't be throwing stuff at it. You see the same thing when somebody goes to a track they've never been to before and they're changing axles. Oh, the car's not right yet. Well, if you haven't pushed that cart to 90% of its capability, what are you doing? you don't know what it's going to do yet, right? And that's the same thing. It's a great story for you to be able to have that kind of an impact on someone. Let's have another quick break here, Alan, because I want to come back and I want to ask you a little more about some coaching, a little more about the sport itself. We got some questions we've got coming from Facebook and Twitter. Man, still lots more to come, folks, on this edition of the Industry Insider, episode number 10. Alan Rudolph from the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy joining us today on the EKN Radio Network. If your dream is IndyCar, set your sights on the Mazda Road to Indy presented by Cooper Tires. The first step of the ladder system is the Cooper Tires USF 2000 Championship powered by Mazda, which prepares young drivers for the calculated jump to the Pro Mazda Championship presented by Cooper Tires, where increased power, grip, and aero downforce fast-track your training. The final rung is the Indy Lights presented by Cooper Tires program. The last 4 Indy Lights champions will be racing in the Verizon IndyCar Series this year, so it's a proven formula. At all 3 levels, you will race at premier venues on the same weekends as IndyCar. Showcase your skills under the watchful eyes of IndyCar scouts and owners. Former karters fill the roster of Mazda Road to Indy graduates like Spencer Pigot, Gabby Chavez, Zach Veach, Ed Jones, and 2017 Indy Lights champion Kyle Kaiser. Recent karting graduates like Oliver Askew are in the middle of their journeys as well. Follow in their footsteps. Fulfill your dream. If you want to race IndyCar, there is only one choice. The Mazda Road to Indy, presented by Cooper Tires. Welcome back to the Industry Insider. My name's Rob Howden. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in to the EKN Radio Network today for what is episode number 10 of this particular podcast series, the Industry Insider. Alan Rudolph from the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy joining us here today. Just before the break, a couple of cool bits about coaching and about what Alan is able to bring to the table. Alan, this is the barrier that we've got to break through, right? For people to understand that, yeah, you could sometimes find speed at the pro shop or the back of the kart shop trailer, but really, man, it's in the driver. And you mentioned before, I love the line, invest in yourself. As I said, you can buy the best skis, I don't care what it is, new boots, whatever. You need to. It's all about the skier. And that's in any sport. You can buy as many golf clubs if you want. If you still slice, you still slice. You got to have instruction. Pro golfers have coaches. It's kind of changing, I think, the mindset and the understanding for people in kart racing that coaching and real coaching, not the guy that they have wrenching on their cart for $250 a day who says he's a coach but never finished in the top 20 in a national in his life. That's not coaching. They're going to tell you, right, if you want to coach, go to somebody who's an educator and somebody who's done it. And obviously your resume speaks for itself. Is it an issue that you find that's hard to break through to a lot of people, or is it something that, man, we just need to get more promotion out of it?
I think it's a combination of both. Definitely get more promotion out there. Look at the club level racer. Maybe it's a budget issue, right? But yeah, what's a couple $100, for some good coaching as opposed to as opposed to a couple $100 for an axle or whatever. It just goes back to that same point. If you look at the national level, though, now you see, the coaches. There's a lot of guys that are out there that I was racing with back in the day that are now these coaches and stuff, right? And they go to every race with these drivers, and that's what they're doing, right? They're coaching at the racing level, and so there's guys making a living doing that stuff right now, coaching these guys. And look, let's use Mike Speed as an example. Everyone knows, Mike and Alex and Scott, hugely successful in kart racing. And, now they've got their own little race team going. And you know what Mike does? Coaches, right? I mean, yeah. You ask one of the drivers who have driven for them and find out how many changes they do to the go-kart until the driver is doing what he should do,
Another perfect example is like Mike Rollison, right? It's Mike and it's Wesley Boswell and it's Joey Wimsett, it's Bonner Moulton, and they're out there racing with their guys, right? When they're doing a coaching day, they're out driving with that guy. They're pushing them hard. And Luke Selican was one of their guys. He ends up becoming one of their coaches. for somebody not in that major size of a team, that's where, you provide such value at your school for a club or a regional guy, or even a national level guy who might want to come out. I don't care how old you are, if you're 15 or if you're 55, the amount you can gain from proper coaching is huge.
Not everybody can afford, let's just say it, not everyone can afford to have that coach go to every race every single weekend, and pound laps with them and do all that, So, if you can, great, but that's not for everybody, So, for the masses, it's coming to my school and getting that one-on-one coaching and taking yourself to the next level.
I got a question for you. Let's move into something here. Like this broad spectrum here. What are your thoughts on the sport right now? You've been in it a long time. You've been a racer. You've been part of the industry. You've been you are and have been for a number of years an educator, a coach. You're now a dad of a young guy who's racing his way through the ranks here now. What are your thoughts on overall on the sport of karting right now? You're a track owner as well, for God's sake. So you got a good feel for it. Right?
Yeah. It's funny. It's as a track owner, you definitely have, I've never been that before. So I definitely have a different outlook on it right now. And, I've got to kind of stay my course and make sure we're not going off and doing different stuff that doesn't align with the industry at the time. I remember Mark Dismore from Newcastle told me a long time ago when I was talking about building a track, he's like, look, you just, don't follow the motor of the month and change stuff up all the time. Just it's your track. You can do it how you want. These are the classes you're going to run, and and go with it and stick with it, and it'll be big. And so, gosh, I think he still runs Yamahas there and has like 100 of them. It's crazy. So there's no Yamahas in this region, but look, everything right now here is IAME products, and we're just behind that and pushing on that. And, and then Briggs, the last Tech has been 8-10 years now. Dave Klaus has really got that thing dialed in, pushing the LO206 program. And that's our biggest class right now. But from a track owner perspective, it gets people there, but from resale side of things, the margins aren't that great. So then it's a volume game, and, but it's been good for the sport. Right. So there's a club racing level, which for us has been really good. There's the regional series that we have, Texas Pro Kart and TSRS, and those are both real strong series here in Texas, the Texas region. And then there's the national level. Well, at the national level, that game is what, to me, has morphed into massive motorhomes and big semi trailers, and just something completely at a level that I would have never expected 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Now the racetracks need massive paddocks because of all the big rigs and stuff. And it didn't used to be that way.
No, we go back 15 years, and, Track Magic rolled in with their 23 or 24 foot trailer, and they were the bigwigs. Like, man, that's a nice trailer. They were rolling big. So I hear where you are on that. And I agree as well when it comes to the fact that club level racing and regional level racing really haven't changed that much over the last last 20 years. It's the national level, which really has morphed into something that's just a crazy animal that feeds essentially about 400 to 500 people. Right, that's it.
No, that's exactly it.
All right, let's jump into the Q&A. I got a couple of quick questions here. Let me have a look. On Facebook, Derek Seams, I believe I pronounced his name correctly, says he's got a question for you, Alan. Who is the best driver you've ever seen?
That's funny. Derek, it's not you. No, he's a great guy. He comes out to he's a league racer in our rental karts, and comes out. Awesome. And he has a Rotax kart that he's trying to start racing at our club levels or whatever. He's just an enthusiast, but love
it. Yeah. Love it. Salt of the earth for us, man. That's what we got to have. But who's the best driver you've ever seen?
I wouldn't say ever. Well, okay. So there's seen, and then there's race against. So a handful of years ago, when this question was asked to me, and the guy when I was racing, we were running the Pro Tour and at that time Stars of Karting and all that kind of stuff. The guy that I was always the most call it worried about was Michael Valiente. And Michael was he was just so solid and calm and, just an Iceman behind the wheel. And so I always say it was Michael. For me, it was Michael at the time when I was racing. Best driver I've ever seen, though, I would have to say, to be honest, Max Verstappen behind the wheel of a kart. I remember the year. I mean, Vegas, the one year I watched him at Vegas at Supernats was the only time I ever got to see him wheel the kart. And he was only 15, I think. And the dude just drove he was a beast. But that's, that's just the one that sticks out. There's so many others over the years that I've had the pleasure of racing with, but it's just the only one that sticks out right now.
Well, we are going to cap off this edition of the Industry Insider with our EKN Radio Network Fast Five. So there's more questions for you to come. I asked it out told everybody on Twitter as well that you and I were going to be doing a podcast. Of course, the really only one we have from Twitter was Rock Island Grand Prix saying 30 plus drivers in the King of the Streets next year for the 25th anniversary of the Rock Island Grand Prix. Will Alan Rudolph be one of them? Will you make the return of the 25th anniversary of Rock Island to see if you can once again wear the crown?
Gosh, man, I would love to do that. I really would. I just would have to prepare myself properly. I wouldn't want to show up, not having been behind the wheel of a shop. I've only driven a shifter kart on my track one time for like 5 laps, Wow. And so I haven't been in a shifter kart in a while, but I will say it was like riding a bike and got right back into it. So I wouldn't want to do it without doing it properly. Let's just say it that way. I'd love to be back there. I just would want to do it right.
That's cool. All right. One last question from Facebook. Don Wesley asks, what's the best way to get a young driver to start understanding more than just tight or loose, understeer or oversteer, and to get them to understand and relay if a kart is jacking or if it's flat? Can you go into deeper detail? What's the best way to get a young driver to start, being able to bring more feedback to their father, mother, tuner?
Oh man, that is a hard one, to be honest. Yeah, no, it really is, because when I start my schools and we do full on ground school and talk about everything from vehicle dynamics to line technique and all that stuff, the fact is if you're not doing everything right as a driver. So what I say is, if you're not braking at the right time and you're not turning in at the right time and you're not coming off of the brakes at the right time and you're not getting to the apex at the right time and you're not accelerating at the right time and you're not hitting the exit of the corner at the right spot in every turn, every lap, then there's nothing I can do to fix your go-kart. And so
does that not play into what I said?
Yeah.
Why when I'm driving, I say to somebody, don't touch it. I can't tell you what to do yet because I'm not hitting my marks yet. And that plays exactly what you said, right?
So
it's
hard for me to, because I see it. I see it, it doesn't have to be a kid, an adult too. They complain about their car being loose. It's loose on the entry of the corner. Well, you know what? It's loose because you're not driving it right. And, so until the driver is doing all of those things right in every turn, lap after lap after lap, then there's nothing I can do to fix it. So it's really hard to for a kid to be able to say, man, this thing it's tight, and what does tight mean to them? Tight mean it's hard to turn?
Yep.
I don't know. Does tight mean it just, feels like it's pushing or understeering going through the corner? Well, is it pushing or understeering because you're overdriving the heck out your way? Kids especially tend to auger it into the corner without using the brakes properly and slowing it down with the front tires. Well, you're doing that. So now it's, heavy on the front, it's pushing, or it's tight, right? So it's just, I don't know. It's difficult to get the kids to communicate.
Here's the answer. Here's the answer to Don Wesley. It's called a one-day school at the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy.
Yeah, right.
Honestly, because take a day to get your driver doing what you just said, on the brakes correctly, with the turn in right. And I've heard people talk about not just being on the brakes early enough, but also getting off the brakes at one point, right? If you're holding the brakes deeper into a corner, it's going to push. You need to roll off the brakes to let the car roll through the corner again. It's so much about the driving aspect that needs to be in place before you're really able to focus on what the kart's doing.
Yeah. That's exactly right. There's so much going on behind the wheel. If you just focus on doing all the right stuff as a driver, everything else kind of fixes itself, right? Until you get to a certain level where you're doing all the right stuff, and then you can say, man, it is just a little bit loose on the exit of the corner. I'm having this consistently, and I know I'm doing everything right, but it's a little bit loose. Okay, then let's try something.
Yeah, that's it. Don, thank you very much for the question, because that's key. That comes back to everything we talked about. Once the driver gets to a certain level, is pushing the cart to a certain max of its capacity, somewhere close to the max of its capabilities, then you can really start to feel what the cart's actually doing. So, listen. Well, you know what? I'm going to jump into the Fast Five, but I wanted to mention something about the racetrack, because when I was able to go down there for the first time, I was probably about a year ago, right? Last year for the final round of the Texas Pro Kart Challenge. You said you jumped into the shifter, did 5 laps there. I want to know, you only did 5. You probably should have did 20, because you designed this racetrack. And Jake French told me he loves the track, but it's one of the most physical racetracks he's ever driven in his life.
It is. Maybe that's why I only did 5 or 6 laps.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, it definitely is physically demanding. It's busy. But it's proper. I mean, at the end of the day, Jake said he before Vegas, he's going to come down here and pound out some laps, so he get his stamina up or whatever. But like you said, when you were here, you saw it. It raced really well, and so I'm proud of that.
I've heard people say to me, "Oh, it's really tough to pass there," and I always say this. I would say, "Well, that's really interesting, because you're telling me what you think from the seat." From where you are and your particular chassis, your setup, your world, your class. I'm the announcer, and I know that I called multiple passes in 5 different corners. So don't tell me you can't pass, because, end of the straightaway, which I think you guys call 6, right? Yep. So end of the straightaway, out of the right-hander, easily into the left-hander, turn 7. Then the next one's, I think, turn 8. You can easily pass into 8. Pass over into turn number 10, which is the left-hand hairpin. You come back around, we saw passes in 13, then into 14, right? Yeah. And then I can't see around the corner, and I'm sure there's a pass. I love it. I love when people say you can't pass somewhere, then I go to a racetrack and I'm calling passes everywhere. I'm like, what? Where does this come from?
Yeah, I will say that there's 1 or 2 spots that on paper I thought for sure that it would be good passing, and it is tough to make a pass there. If everybody's all equal on speed, it's really difficult to make a pass there. But but like you said, there's a solid 4 or 5 places that just passing all the time. Boom, 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 and some of them are right back and forth. So it makes for good racing. If somebody makes a pass, boom, you get them in the next corner. It was exciting to hear you announcing it.
It was good. I loved it. Always, a pleasure to be in the Howden Tower. You rock.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You got your name on it.
I love it. I appreciate that. All right, let's jump in and cap off this edition of the Industry Insider with the EKN Radio Network Fast 5. Alan, I've got 5 questions for you. They're pretty simple, but they're going to detail some cool stuff about you and your career. Okay. You ready?
Okay.
Question number 1. What was your first kart? And give us some detail. You talked about trading out for that kart, but what was it? I always like finding out what chassis people had, the very first one.
You know what? I'm 99% sure it was a Margay with a Yamaha on it.
With a Yamaha?
Yeah, 100cc Yamaha.
Okay, that's right. Any idea what?
9 years old.
You were 9 years old.
With a pipe. It didn't have a can. They didn't have cans back in those days.
Oh, God, no. No, it's got a slippy pipe. There's no cans. Yeah, right. All right, so you can't say your own for this. What is your favorite racetrack? Question number 2. What's your favorite racetrack?
Oh, geez. Do I have to pick one?
No, you don't. You know what? You can give me a couple if you want.
I always used to love racing that when it wasn't raining, of course, at Rodney's place in Norman, Oklahoma. That was always fun.
Yeah. Oklahoma Motorsports Complex, fantastic track. Yeah.
The thing was a beater. It rubbered up so bad, and you had to stay in the turns for so long. It was like winding inside of itself, and then unwinding. Jesus, it'd kill you.
The infield section of that track was a killer, right?
Yeah,
oh man.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I had some success. Believe it or not, at Shawano. that track was just lots of elevation changes. I don't even know how many turns it had when you ran a full course, but probably like 17 corners or something.
That's right. And
Lots of
that's
elevation. So that was a pretty fun track.
all right. Okay. Question number 3. What is the biggest win of your karting career?
In karting?
Yep.
Whew. Oh my gosh. I don't even know. I mean, obviously the fifth King of Streets was a big deal. It was on my chassis. It was the last race there. That was a big one for me. I liked that. But there one that I remember sort of, I don't know if you call it put me on the map or not, but at Quincy in the Park, they used to do was it the Bud Shootout or the Miller Mile?
The Miller Mile.
Miller Mile, and it was kind of my first big race win against guys like Scott Evans and Scott Sellergren and stuff. And they did a Calcutta where they bid on the drivers, and I was on a Burrell. I mean, not Burrell, the Buller card at the time, and Scott Sellergren and Scott Evans are on Margay's. And guess what? Keith Freeberg did the highest bid for me to win the race so he could win the money because he knew I was going to win. And,
on a Buller, on one of Kermit's carts. That's cool.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. One of the wins I thought was really cool for you and I was able to be there was when they had the CIK FIA test race up at Mosport.
Yeah.
In Formula A. Yeah. There were a lot of big dogs up for that race, and I remember you were able to win that one on the Margay, and that was cool because that was a Margay win on a Formula A, right?
Yeah, and an international race. You probably remember more about mine wins than I do, but no, that was a big deal. And Keith, Margay was the whole team was there, and my brother, and so that was a pretty big deal. And it was, if I remember right, it was from deep in the field because we had a bad pre-final, and then it was raining.
Yep.
It started raining, so I was almost last, like 32nd or whatever, to win the thing in the wet. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
All right. Question number 4: who is or was your biggest rival in karting?
In karting, I would say a couple. I mean, look, it goes to the years I spent. Street racing, it was always the Scott Sellergren, Scott Evans era, right? There was one of those two guys that were.
It's funny you're saying this, Alan, because your career really can be put into a couple of different capsules, right?
Yeah, totally.
There was a Pro Moto Tour shifter kart days. There's your Yamaha street racing days, right? So if we go to street racing, it was Evans and Scott Sellergren, two badasses, of course, on the streets. You
go to as far back as road racing with guys like Brian Herta, where we were sprint road racing. Just, I mean, that obviously dates me in a long time ago, but, so there road racing, I used to love to do road racing and drafting and things like that. And then I would say in SCUSA, for the time of my Pro Tour stuff, it was always Scott Speed. At the time it was Scott, and then there was a little bout with Memo Gidley and, Allmendinger and Valiente and all the who's, Philip Giebler. Those guys were all, every weekend it would have been any one of those guys, right?
Yeah, I look back at those early days, Jason LaPointe, Darren Elliott, Kyle Martins, going head to head with those guys. That was good stuff. Now, one thing we didn't touch on, and before I go to question number 5, I'll bounce this at you real quick, just because I think when we talk about your experience and the spectrum, the wide spectrum, Alan, from running road racing and doing the sprint stuff, there was a time in your life there, a couple of years, where you got an opportunity to run some supercarts as well.
Yeah.
That was some badass stuff for sure. I know you had some fun on a PVP a number of times back in the day.
I'll tell you, Rob, that is the only thing. That's the only any vehicle I've ever driven where when you step on the gas, it's like a big whole shit moment. Like you don't realize what having 103 horsepower on a go-kart is like. Yeah. It's insane, and it was so much fun. They're so fast. I remember the first time I had it, I put it together, ran it at Bondurant, did some laps there, and was like, "This is crazy." And I go to Laguna Seca to race, and for the first race, and now I'm at Laguna Seca, and here comes Eddie Lawson and Wayne Rainey. All right,
yeah.
These guys are legends. And I thought I was hauling ass, and all of a sudden they blew by me like I was sitting still, and I was like, "Oh crap! I haven't even got this thing to the limit yet, right?" And so I was like, "Woo, big learning curve here." I mean, to take one of those things to the limit it's something else. I'll tell you that. But in the end, that was one of my most memorable races too, being on the podium at Laguna Seca with Wayne Rainey and Eddie Lawson, and I'll never forget that for that moment.
No doubt about it. I wanted to bring that up. Obviously, talk about everything you've done racing wise, being our premier educator, coach, driver coach, teacher in the sport. That opportunity to get out there in the supercard at Laguna Seca, at Road America. Man, I have so much respect for guys that race supercarts because they are the ultimate ride when it comes to four-wheel karting. It's just ridiculous.
It's unbelievable. I believe I still have the track record at Road America. At like a 212 or a 214 or
probably.
It's ridiculous.
The wild thing about, and I always tell the story about Road America, you got to give people the audio feel of it because those carts scream so much. And I remember being there, and you're rolling down the front straightaway, right? Then you're off the gas into one, and you're back on it again in two. And you could just, when you're sitting there in the grid, it's or on the pit lane,
it's correct.
You know what I mean? It's so visceral. It's amazing.
Yeah, when I was road racing, not in whatever 100cc or lay down stuff or whatever, and guys like Johnny West would blow by you at going twice your speed, and it would scare the shit out of you. And I always wanted to do it, and finally got the opportunity to do it. And it's a ride like nothing else. Let me tell you.
Yeah, Mr. Supercar Johnny West. I remember when I first met him, he was on a Gibson, like a lay-down Gibson. It wasn't even like a proper European supercar. I was looking at this guy like, you are a badass.
Well, he's nuts.
All right, he's nuts. Final question. We'll wrap this thing up. Question number 5 of our Fast Five: who has been your biggest mentor or influence?
The first right answer is my dad, of course. He's just always been there from the beginning, taught me everything I knew about mechanical and working on carts, and, supported me all the way. So, it definitely has to be my dad, my mom, for all the support they've done. And then there's been some integral people over the years, Mr. Lou Cariff, who got behind me. I wouldn't have been a Bondurant if Lou wouldn't have introduced me to Bob. And so, good longtime friend of mine, Lou, had introduced me to Bob, and that's how I ended up at Bondurant, which is really what paved the rest of this, being at Bondurant.
True enough. There you go. I appreciate it. There's your Fast Five. Well done. You're out of the hot seat.
Thanks, bro.
Alan, thank you so much for joining us, man. We're wrapped up in this edition of the Industry Insider. Just to cap it off, this is the talk that I always had with you about what you were doing at the Bondurant Superkart School. You've taken it to such a new level with Speed Sports Racing Park and the Alan Rudolph Racing Academy, because you're not, Bondurant didn't have that rental kart program where you're bringing guys right out of the sport or right out of rental karting into the kart, into kart racing competition. And then to be able to provide our sport with our one university, the one college that you can actually go to, and you can buy a $400 axle, or you can go out and buy the expensive $600-700 magnesium wheels to find those 0.2 of a second, but you're never guaranteed of the speed. You can, if you go to your school and spend a day or 2 days with you and the staff, you're guaranteed to be a better driver. And I think for me, that's the bottom line. That's exactly right. When you invest in yourself, it's a guarantee for extra speed and more enjoyment.
That's exactly right. I promise you that.
It is. That's what it is. It's an experience of your life, but you're going to come out a better driver, as you would be a better golfer or a better skier or whatever it may be. It's a no-brainer. It's not like rolling the dice on trying to win a lottery. It's a 1-for-1. It's 100% win. So I just want to thank you for being that for our sport, because our sport needs that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Rob.
I appreciate you spending some time with us. I know you're busy down there at the racetrack. Thanks for carving out an hour for me. And listen, I appreciate everything you do for us, everything you do for the sport. Thanks again for being on the EKN Radio Network.
All right, Rob, thank you.
Folks, one of the ambassadors of our sport, no doubt about it. If you've been around for any length of time, you've heard about Alan Rudolph, you've watched what he's done. Educator, veteran driver, 5-time king of the streets. Maybe we'll try to get him back for race number 6. We'll see. I'm not sure if the wife will let him do that or not. But folks, Alan, thanks again, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Industry Insider, episode number 10 here on the EKN Radio Network. On behalf of the entire staff of EKN and my friend Alan Rudolph, it's been Rob Howden. Bye for now.